To start this review, I'm going to mention all of the positive things that came out of this update. Obviously, no matter what I say in this video, this update was pretty amazing and it added a lot of cool stuff. Starting with the submarines, I'm honestly surprised that there weren't more issues with drowning well inside of the submarine and other stuff like that. The idea of needing 3 secret fish for the final zone isn't bad, and I didn't have much trouble with it, but it feels wrong to call them secret if people need them and are therefore getting them very often. Other than that, the amount of time it generally takes to get what you need for the calm zone seems appropriate. The rods from this update are all pretty impressive, especially since they actually function on release. The new volcanic rod seems like it could be very viable for early game money making, and it's also nice to see something that's obtainable for newer players. The Rod of the Zenith has a very unique passive that I barely even understand. The Leviathan's Fang rod is the first rod to be made specifically for one fish, and even though the Ethereal Prism rod doesn't look appropriate at all for being the best rod in the game, I still like it, and I think its requirements are pretty appropriate. Also, I think it's refreshing that there seems to be a lack of reskinned fish. Reskinned fish have been a problem the past few updates, so it's nice to see that they're changing it up. Speaking of fish models, the models in this update are absolutely insane. Personally, I think that they are probably the best we've seen so far. Finally, the last thing I'm going to mention is the environments. The decoration in this update has to be some of the best I've seen in any Roblox game. Like, parts of this update look like a showcase. But this is kind of a double-edged sword, and I'm about to tell you why. It seems like the extreme detail in some areas left any other less important area looking practically unfinished. As you can see in the background, most of the traveling and exploring in this update consists of this. To be fair, this isn't the most important part of the update, but you do spend a very large chunk of time staring at this. I personally feel more like a tiny drone traveling through like a sewage pipe than an underwater cave explorer. And this is because a majority of the cave system is like perfectly cylindrical. Some areas literally have almost zero imperfections, they just look completely man-made. Also, you can very clearly see in the Challenger's Deep and the Calm Zone that certain areas were just completely left alone. It feels like they just forgot about these areas. Now, if we look at the submarines again, not only are you using them for up to 10 minutes straight at a time, you're also trying to avoid game-breaking bugs unless you want to start the 10 minutes completely over. At some points while playing, I thought that they actually fixed the submarine bugs because I didn't experience any glitches. But every time I thought that eventually something horrific would happen and it would like take away all my friends from me and they would be sent to the void and I would be left alone with no submarine. Once again though, I will be fair, it's impossible to fix every single bug before releasing anything. Also, at the time of recording this video, there hasn't been a large hotfix yet, but by the time you see this, there might have been one. Really, we should be glad that the developers are fixing it relatively quickly, but it is still disappointing that one of the most important parts of the update, being the new vehicle, doesn't really work. Now let's talk about what is probably the most problematic part of this update. On release, the Calm Zone had no innkeeper and took a gruelingly long time to get to. And you had to go on this journey every time you wanted to do something other than fish down there. The devs did quickly add an innkeeper, which was greatly appreciated, but the fact that you can set your spawn also made people realize that the Calm Zone, unlike any other new area, did not have a way to quickly teleport to the surface. This is especially an issue because there isn't a merchant in the Calm Zone, so you can't sell your fish, and having your spawn down there separates you from any other server events, like a Kraken hunt or Megalodon hunt. But it has actually been confirmed that they're fixing this and they're adding a portal to the surface. I just really don't understand how that wouldn't have been the logical thing to do in the first place. The only explanation I can think of is that they wanted the Calm Zone to have a trade-off. So you can be in this really good area, but you also are separated from everything else, which would make it less good and more balanced, I guess. Next up, I'm gonna mention the performance. With the last few updates, I'll admit I was impressed with the apparent optimization. I feel like for the most part I haven't been having any huge issues with lag, but you should also take into account that I constantly have 30 FPS or less because of my inventory alone. The Mariana's Veil update was the first update in a while where I noticed that at some moments my frame rate seemed to drop below 15 or 20 frames per second. I've become accustomed to the halved frame rate Fisch offers me, but I'm still able to notice a drop. However, this update is gigantic, and I guess really we should expect some frame rate drops. I mean, it's not the biggest deal ever, it's not game ruining, but that being said, my computer is very capable of running any Roblox game at 60 to 120 frames. And I think that any lower end devices would probably have a bigger issue with frame rate than I am. Also, a second ago I mentioned the size of this update, which brings me to another point. Some of the areas in this update are a little too big. At some point it almost feels like they didn't use any size reference while building an environment. This mostly applies to part of the calm zone and some of the hallway caves, but especially the one in the Challenger's Deep that I showed you before. I will say though, this could be on purpose. The feeling of being tiny could make a more threatening atmosphere, or it could make the area feel more grand, or it could be to make you feel like you don't belong, like whatever is here is way bigger than you. But also, I don't like walking. Finally, what many of you may have been waiting for, I'm gonna talk about the gameplay. Overall, this update has pretty good gameplay. I mean, it's a fishing game, but I gotta say, Mining Simulator may have not been the best choice. My first impression of the update being mining some rocks for 5 to 10 minutes was not very flattering. Then after that, you have to do it 2 more times. It's not like it takes more than a couple minutes, but it's so boring it can make you think about how behind you are in school, which is the last thing you're going to be thinking about while playing video games. Overall though, it's a small issue in the grand scheme of things. Parts of this update feel like a whole new game in the best way, while others feel like I'm playtesting a game in alpha, which means it feels unfinished and unfit for actual players. Some sections of gameplay are time-consuming and frustrating, while others make you feel accomplished and fulfilled. Despite the topic and tone of this video, I'm impressed by the work of the Fisch dev team, and I know they are working on fixing many of the issues mentioned in this video. This update is by no means a negative addition to the game, and I'm excited to see how much better it'll be with a few small changes.